everybody. How are you? It's nice to see you in Zoom. Welcome to tonight's Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminar. I'm Justin Waldman, Associate Artistic Director at the Old Globe. And on behalf of Barry Edelstein, our Erna, Finci, Viterbi Artistic Director, and Tim Shields, our Audrey as Geisel Managing Director, I'm so glad you can join us tonight for our wonderful chat with the great sound designer, Lindsay Jones. I am coming to you from the ancestral home of the Kumeyaay, who have been the stewards of these lands for generations. Before we get started, I'd like to take a second to recognize the people who make this event possible. A massive thank you to Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their generous support of the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminar. And as luck would have it, today is Vicki Zeiger's birthday. So a virtual happy birthday song. I hope you and Carl are celebrating in style today. And also a thank you to Joanne Kilty for her support of me and my role as host. The Globe and I are so grateful to all of you. And I'd like to thank all of you for your support of the Old Globe. If you'd like to enjoy more of these conversations with Globe artists, please consider making a gift to our Globe Rising campaign. Your support will sustain us until we can open our doors once again. This round of virtual insight seminars, as you may know, is focusing on the Globe's production of Hamlet on the radio and the incredible artists that are bringing it to life. Lindsay is designing the sound for the show, so we'll get to talk a little bit about that. Lindsay and I are going to talk for about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open the floor up to questions. And hopefully we'll get through a bunch of them before time runs out. Finally, as an FYI, we'll be recording this session to share in the future. So that is it for me. That is my long spiel. And we get to the drum roll, please, of welcoming our incredible guest, Lindsay Jones. Lindsay Jones, will you please make your magical appearance into the Zoom box?
Hi, everyone.
There he is. Lindsay Jones.
Hi.
So nice to see you. It's about time. Yes.
Oh, nice. Yes.
There's
always a deadline over my shoulder. Yes,
I'm just setting you up for your job.
Thank you.
It's so good to see you. How are you?
You too. I'm good. It's great to see you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
It is my pleasure. Where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So it's nice that we're in the same time zone.
Yes.
We're talking to East Coasters, and they're like, dude, it's real late.
No, I'm just getting started. I'll be up for hours.
It's almost dinner time.
Nice.
Well, let me embarrass you a little bit and give a little bit of your incredible bio and career.
Good luck.
So I've known you for many years, Lindsay.
Yes.
And but I found out more about you today that blew my mind. So Lindsay Jones is apparently an international man of mystery. But I may be wrong. I think this is Hamlet on the Radio is Lindsay's 19th show at the Old Globe. Yes. That's a lot of shows. They include Picasso, La Panagile, Barefoot in the Park, Skeleton Crew, Opus, In This Corner, and he won the Craig Knoll Award for his sound design on Opus. In This Corner, Lincoln Ness, Much Ado About Nothing, and many more. We could probably do the math and find out how many more there actually are. But he is a Tony-nominated sound designer and composer. He's worked on over 500 productions from London to Canada to New York and maybe every city in the United States. Instead of listing the theaters where he's worked, because it's literally all of them, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just list the cities in which he's won or been nominated for awards for best sound design. And these include, but are not limited to, New York, San Diego, Chicago. He's won 7 Jeff Awards. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Hartford, and Washington, D.C. Okay. He's composed scores for over 35 movies, TV shows for Sony and Lifetime, podcasts for Audible, he's working for the big monolith in the sky, and even video games. He's on faculty at the North Carolina School for the Arts, which is his alma mater, we'll get to in a second, has taught at Yale, Juilliard, Northwestern, UCSD, and many others. Now into the stuff I didn't quite know about Lindsay. I knew most of that. The scale blew my mind, but he got his BFA at North Carolina School in the Arts as an actor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally
and he's written and performed in 2 of his own solo shows.
Yes, that's true.
And he's the lead singer and bassist for a rock band called the Nubile Thangs.
Yes.
And they have 5 albums and have toured North America many times.
Yes.
He's also a major arts advocate. He founded the Theatrical Sound Designers and Composers Association and the Collaborator Party. Okay. And he has the most airline miles of anybody I've ever met in my entire life. And probably the best travel stories that he shares frequently on Facebook to the delight of many. And we're all, everybody's asked you to write the book. So
yes, I'm working on that too, actually. Believe it or not.
and as you can see, he's one of the most kind and generous people in the business.
Oh, thank you.
So this is a virtual round of applause for Lindsay Jones.
Thank you.
Welcome to our Insight Seminar. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is amazing.
Okay, man, you're fascinating. Actor, rock star, designer, composer, arts advocate. How did this career in the arts begin for you? Let's go back to the very beginning. How did it all begin?
Oh my gosh. So, well, as you said, I started off as an actor, but even before I was an actor, I was always fascinated with music and sound. And from the time I was a small boy, my father was a huge collector of jazz records. And so what I used to do a lot was I would just pull out an album out of his collection, put it on the turntable, and just read the liner notes of the albums. And I did that. I went through his entire collection that way, just listening and being really just obsessed with music from an early age and wanting to learn about it as much as I could. And I also was so interested in acting, and I wanted to be a musician. So when I was in high school, I started just doing acting roles at the community theater that I worked at. I grew up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And that ultimately led me to being, I got into the North Carolina School of the Arts and went there, got a BFA in acting, which is a classic conservatory training, much like the conservatory that you guys run at the Old Globe. And while I was at school, I formed a rock band, which is still around 30 years later. We're still together. And what happened is we graduated from the North Carolina School of the Arts, and I moved to Chicago, where I started working as an actor and as a musician. And, I had always been interested in sound and music as an actor. And I always felt like sound and music really affected me as an actor. When if I was performing and there was music, I would really feel how it informed my performance, and it got, really inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day, a friend of mine in Chicago came to me and said, "Hey, we're doing the show and we need a lot of loud rock music for this show. Would you be willing to put that music together?" And I said, "Sure, yeah, I can do that." And then they said, "Oh, also, by the way, we're going to need you to do the sound design as well. Can you do that as well?" And I went, "Yeah, totally." And I didn't really know what that was. I just sort of said yes. And I wound up sort of faking it and putting it together. And the show went on to be incredibly successful, and it ran for 9 months in Chicago, which was a really long time for.
That's like, it was like storefront, like in the
like a storefront theater in Chicago.
That's awesome.
It's crazy. So then what started happening was people started calling and saying like, "Hey, will you sound design our show?" And I thought, well, I'll just do this until the jobs dry up, and then I'll go back to acting. And that was over 25 years ago. The jobs have just never dried up. And
500 shows later,
500 shows later, here I am.
So that guy that gave you that call,
yes,
is an important man.
he got me into it. I know. I'd love to find him again. But yeah, it's just been, I feel incredibly fortunate and blessed, and just super lucky to have stumbled onto this thing. And I really truly love the job. Like I love going to the theaters. I love creating music. I love new challenges. So I'm always constantly inspired by it.
That's super cool. That's so great. And that's one of the great things about Chicago's theater scene in those storefronts, right? Is that it's like, I don't know, let's get some people together and make a thing.
It's the best. I mean, I love Chicago as a theater city. I think it's one of the best theater communities in America, mainly because everyone who's working on theater there, they're not doing it necessarily to get rich or famous. They're really doing it because they love it. And there's such a wonderful feeling of ensemble and family and community, and everyone feels really committed. So it's a great place to learn how to work.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So let's maybe take a step back for a quick second, just because like I find like sometimes like some of the tech things, it's like, what do you actually do as a sound designer? So what is your job? What are you in charge of? How do you do it? How's it work? Like, let's just bare bones it.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
So technically, my job as the sound designer is I'm responsible for everything you hear in the theater. So that can mean I create sound effects and I create sound environments so that you feel like you're in the same environment as the people on stage. It may mean if I'm working on a musical, I'm designing where the speakers go and how the microphones are placed, and the microphones are placed on the actors. And then I'm also sort of in charge of supervising the mix so that everyone in the theater gets the exact same great sounding show, no matter where they sit from one end of the theater to the other. If they need music, I frequently write music for theater. So I create underscore music for dramatic moments or transition music to take us from one scene to another. And then, yeah, beyond that, I'm also in charge of just making sure that the sound is this incredibly supportive and rich, full environment so that the audience can really just lose themselves in the story and forget about everything else. And just for those 2 hours or however they're long they're in the theater, they feel like they're standing in those characters' shoes right along with those people on stage.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
And you do it very, very well.
Thank you.
I think it's an amazing thing, right? Because it's like, just the idea of I think people don't realize it's like that doorbell cue went through like there's every doorbell under the sun, and how do you pick the right one for that house and like in that family at that time, like, and all that kind of detail is like it takes so much effort to find all those things.
It's
and
so
that's
true.
like one thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great part about theater, though. Everything is a collaborative effort. We all are constantly working together, because you're right, there are 1,000 choices for everything. And so really what you're doing is just trying to figure out what the best choice is, what the clearest storytelling choice is, and also just what fits in best into however we're choosing to tell the story.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
Yeah. And another fun thing is you get some really cool toys, right? Like we're going to talk a little bit later when we talk about him on the radio and show some of like actual like computer stuff that you work with. But like it's amazing how it's changed in our life in the last 20 years. When we were 4, we sound design was a much different thing than it is now. Like you were reel-to-reel tapes, and now it's all on computers and QLab. Like, how do you need a computer science degree to be a sound designer now?
You would think you would, but you really don't. I mean, I will say this. Yes, sound design has gone through an insane change. I mean, to give you an idea, when I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts as a student, there was no sound design program. And now, 20 some years later, I'm teaching in that sound design program. So like, that's the biggest change right off the bat. But in addition to that, yeah, we've graduated from what used to be tapes or vinyl, and now most of what we do is computer-generated playback, because computers have become so ubiquitous. And it can feel intimidating sometimes, because computers can seem weird and mysterious. Things go on inside of them that you don't really know what's happening. But on the other hand, computers can be really inspiring. And I mean, when you think about the technology that you have available to you through computers now, like, every MacBook that is produced now has GarageBand on it. So if anyone has a Mac, or even I'm sure there are the same things on PC, if you wanted to record a song, the technology is available for you to do that immediately and actually make it sound pretty great. So I kind of love the democratization of music, and how everyone has access to these tools that can really lead to expression for everybody.
That's fantastic. That's so cool. It's like, so it's just so neat to watch things change now. I mean, I remember back in the day, it was like, okay, cue the CD up to 1 minute, 37 seconds and wait, and then press play.
Yeah. Or even just the whole idea of like, okay, I like the first 5 seconds of this music, and I like the last 10 seconds of this music, but I don't like the 5 seconds in between. You used to have to get like a razor blade and cut the tape in half and then tape it back together and then that was your cue. Yeah.
Oh my
I'm
God.
grateful that those days are no longer.
So like that's a great thing, because like how do you prep, how much prep can you do before a show versus like how do you have to react to it as you're seeing? Because like, oh, he's walking, so I think I'm going to need 8 seconds, but maybe 12, but maybe 6 because he goes real fast. Like how do you make
Yeah.
those changes on the fly, and how can you adjust for them?
Well, that's a really great question, actually. So what you do is because the thing about creating sound design for theater is live theater is a living thing, and it is never quite the same night to night. Like it's always a little bit different. So part of how you have to imagine the creation of material that will accompany those live performances is about how to make them so that they can be kind of flexible. They can expand so that a stage manager can cue something to happen at a certain point and it will feel seamless. But what you don't really see is that it's all sort of crossfading and going into one another to give as much flexibility as possible so that it feels totally organic to the actor's performance and no one sees all of the machinations that are going on behind it.
Yeah, it's so neat. It's just looking over, going over that table. It's like they're making a spaceship.
Yeah, we are. We're doing all sorts of crazy things.
I'm going to start. I'm just, I know we're both very handsome gentlemen, but I'm going to start sharing some screens to show some pictures of some of the shows you worked on at the Globe,
Okay,
just
great.
to kind of vary it up. But I'm going to pop that on. But we'll just keep kind of. This is Barefoot in the Park. Remembering this one? This was
I love this show. Yeah, it was so great.
I was saying to Lindsay, it was like it's hard to show pictures of sound.
Yeah,
it doesn't quite work.
Oh well.
Let me ask you this. So you're also a composer as well as a designer. Like, and you talk about building some cues that like move from one thing to the other. Like, how do those lines blur? And like, what are the differences, and where does one end and the other begin? And is it like, how do you split your identity between designing and composing?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't really split it very often. I try as much as possible when I can to create music and sound together because I really feel like they are two intertwined sort of things. And if they're created separately of one another, sometimes different aesthetics can make it feel like they're in two different worlds. But the other thing, I mean, and Justin, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I don't have any formal training in music whatsoever. So I'm completely self-taught as a composer and as a musician. So for me, creating music is really the same as creating sound. Every sound is a musical object to me. It feels like music. So really it feels like taking sound effects and moving it into a music score. They just feel like other musical elements that are the same way. So yeah, it's kind of just a philosophy thing of being able to integrate music and sound as much as possible.
I love that idea of music as object. That's really cool. I love that's a really wonderful way to think about it and to describe it. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
I as a director, I always had the hardest time talking with sound designers. Because like it was like, okay, that you said that could be more blue, or like that costume could be more green, can that be taller or something? And then in talking to a sound designer, I was always like talking about feelings of things.
Yeah.
And because I don't know music, it was always difficult. I always found I was like, I don't think I'm being clear. But a great sound designer like you takes that idea of like, it needs to feel more bittersweet.
Yeah.
And then translates that into sound. Like how do you account for that alchemy?
So yeah, you're so right, Justin. A lot of what music and sound is, the way I describe it, is it provides an emotional context for the acting performances that are around it. And the idea is we see these people on stage and they're delivering these performances which are heartfelt and affecting. But what the sound and music can really provide is that sort of internal experience that they're having that maybe is not so easy for them to communicate. And so what you're trying to do is as much as possible, put those people in the same emotional state that those people on stage are in. So the audience feels like they're right there with it. So yeah, you're creating music. You have to be incredibly emotionally sensitive, and you have to create music that will put you as an audience member in the same place as those people on stage.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like it's so fun when like, and then it's in, then that's a piece of art in and of itself.
Yeah,
the mini piece of art within a larger piece of art that is furthering the story and the feelings and things like that. That's so cool. I want to talk a little bit about your work at the Globe.
Great.
We just saw some Skeleton Crew. This is Picasso at Le Panagile.
Yes.
19 shows at the Globe. You worked on 4 Globe stages, all 3 currently, and the Cassius Carter, the dearly departed. Do you remember all of them?
Sure.
Do you have any favorites that really stuck out for you?
Oh my gosh, I love working at the Globe, so I kind of have fond memories of all of them. Like, looking at this picture of Picasso at Le Panagile, I loved working on this show. I thought, Hal Linden just cracked me up consistently through this entire process. I grew up watching him on television, and just to be around his sort of wry humor, as well as his, he was able to just riff on a clarinet at any given moment. He was such a treat to work with. It's funny, I will say this, that 2 of the shows that I worked on at the Globe were both happening at the same time when my children were scheduled to be born. And so the first show I did was Beyond Therapy. My son was about to be born. So I remember that show very well, because I was like really enjoying the experience, but waiting for the phone call at any moment that I would have to rush back to Los Angeles for the birth of my son, which thankfully did not happen. He wound up being late, so that worked out great. And then the same thing happened with my daughter, where I remember being in TAC at the Globe, probably 5 days before my daughter was born, and then rushing back to LA right after the show opened. And I think with that, it really was that show opened, and then my daughter was born like 2 days later.
Oh my God. Your wife is very patient.
She is super patient. I had all these plans made. I remember I for the Beyond Therapy tech, I actually arranged for a helicopter in case I had to take like a last second flight back to LA to make sure I caught it on time, but I didn't have to use it, thankfully, so I stayed out of trouble.
Oh my God. I don't even want to know how much that would have cost.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it worked out.
Have you ever seen on the Uber app, like Copter shows up every once in a while?
Totally.
I've always wanted to be like, okay.
Yeah.
Just see.
There's a service that does that now, and I have actually thought about using it many times. So far, I have yet to use it.
Oh my God. Well, if we do, we can go split these.
Okay, great.
So what's it like working at the Globe for you? Like what have your experience in San Diego been like?
I mean, I love working at the Globe. The people there are wonderful, of course. They are a really lovely group of people. And the audiences are always fantastic. They're super, super smart. They're super involved. It's great to work on shows and then see an engaged audience come up and really immediately jump into the performances. That is always so much fun. And I mean, to be completely honest, you guys have an unfair advantage over every other theater in America because you are set in Balboa Park, which is beautiful. So like on my 10-minute break of the theater, I walk outside and it's this gorgeous park, and the zoo's over there and museums are over there, and the bandstand and all that stuff. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, it's wonderful. It's great.
Location, right?
It's so true. So I love working at the Globe. It's the best.
Well, we love having you at the Globe. So
thank you.
Feeling is mutual admiration society.
Thank you.
Okay, so I did some math, which admittedly is very dangerous for me to be doing math. But we talked that you've done over 500 shows.
Yes.
So if the average tech for a show is about 2 weeks, so that's 1,000 weeks in tech. And if you divide that by 52, That means you spent 19 years of your life in tech.
That is technically true. Yes.
I mean, I'm like flabbergasted, and also just like, but more in the line, like, how do you manage all these projects? Like, you are notoriously one of the busiest men in show business. Like, you have like back to back to back to back shows, and you're always like, how do you literally manage to be in all those places? And then also, how do you have the brain space for that amount of different projects?
The brain space part is actually the easy part, if you can imagine, because the thing that I love so much about working in theater is I love the challenges, and I love the sort of creative challenges in terms of like, okay, this show needs this thing. What is that? How do we find it? You know, working on that. I find all of that so inspiring, and that really is the thing that keeps me going. So the idea that it's difficult to keep straight, which it certainly is from time to time, is really mitigated by the part that it's so much fun and it is so inspiring to work on, that I never am bored, and I am constantly looking for new challenges. The bigger question of how do I actually go through 19 years in tech? Thankfully, I don't always have to be in tech for 2 weeks for every show, or otherwise I would be really in trouble. But yeah, it is, the way you do it is you really have to be very careful in your planning, and you have to be extremely clear and upfront with everyone you work with about your scheduling, your availability, what exactly you're going to do, when you're going to do it. And then the most important part is you've got to deliver. You have to deliver every single time. And that is something I'm very committed to, is that I really try to give 110% to every single show I'm working on, no matter how short or how long I'm with them, or how much I'm getting paid, or how little I'm getting paid. I want everyone to feel like I have given the absolute best that I can give, so that hopefully people feel satisfied and they're willing to work with me to figure out the rest.
Yeah, it's an amazing jigsaw puzzle, but like, it's always worth it.
It is always
worth it. So
thank you.
I like sighed heavily when I did that math. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Hamlet.
Great.
I'm gonna jump through a couple of these pictures, but I'll show some of these, and we'll get to the Hamlet photos in a second. So a radio play, huh? It's so old, it's new.
Yeah. Right? Welcome back.
Technology's cyclical, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So how does your job change into the medium of a radio play?
So the biggest thing is, of course, there's no visual. So as a result, whereas in a theatrical experience, I am part of the storytelling process, and an important part, but there are many other elements: sets, lights, costumes, projections, other things like that help tell that story along with the performances. In an audio play, it's all audio. So it's kind of great in its own way, because it allows a tremendous amount of creativity and freedom to really try ideas of how to evoke a response for an audience member to identify with the performer only through sound, only through audio. So in a way, it's kind of like my normal job of working in theater taken to the next level. Mm-hmm. Because now I really have to be incredibly specific, and I have to look for ways to really immerse the audience fully in that sound experience, so they really feel like they're in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's amazing just like how many more axes of things that you need to take care of in this, so technically, can you tell us technically, how do you do it? Like, how do we get, we have 22 actors in what, like at least 5 different states and 1 in Canada?
I think that's right. Yes.
And how did they come together to do this?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a little complicated. It requires a lot of coordination. And thankfully, I have somebody like Justin who's able to help me in this coordination, because otherwise I'm not sure how we do it. But what the process is we send out what are basically recording devices to each one of the actors. And we send out a full sort of kit so that that actor has a microphone, they have a recording device, they have everything they need so that we can have them record directly into that device. Then the next step is over Zoom, we work with each actor to help them find the best sort of sound environment for them to record in. So for many of them, that is their clothes closet, if you can imagine it, because it is a small room that's usually away from everything else, and it is surrounded by soft goods, which are the clothes in that closet. So that makes it a fairly dead space. So we work with the actors to help situate themselves inside of their closets or other space that is best for recording. We then teach them how to use their recorder, and we teach them how to upload their files at the end of the day so that we can get them. And then we all get on a massive Zoom call where we all act. Here we go. There's a picture of, this is straight from a recording that we did. So these are all the actors in the show, as well as the sound designers and Barry Edelstein in the corner down on the left, as we all work through the play together. And even though we're all talking to each other over Zoom and acting with each other over Zoom, the performances are being recorded locally into those devices. So we receive those things. And so then after all of those performances are recorded, all the actors upload all of their files that they've recorded to the sound design team. And then we go through the process of manually putting all those individual files together. So it's like making a huge sort of sandwich of different vocal files. Then once that's there, we work with Barry to make sure that it is the exact vocal performance that he's looking for. When that's finished, we add sound design to it, we add music to it, we add all other sound elements, as well as work with the voices to put them in the right sort of space, so that if two actors are talking to each other and one of those actors is, you know, far away, we make their voice sound like it's far away, all those things. And then eventually, after enough of that, presto, it's an audio drama. We're ready to go.
Only that's it.
Yeah.
That's all. Oh my God.
That's it. Piece of cake.
I mean, it sounds so complex and convoluted, but like it actually has been really smooth getting all these, knock on wood, right? Getting all these people into all these spaces and hearing them and having them be able to work. I mean, again, this is one of those technology moments where it's like, without this, it couldn't happen. I mean, if you're looking at this thing, you know, Barry's in San Diego, you're in LA, Talisa Friedman is in LA, Michael Genet is in New York, and that's just one column.
I know. And Grantham, who was our Hamlet, did part of the performances in Texas, but then also went on vacation to New Mexico at one point. So we actually recorded him in 2 different states, depending on the day.
And so, John Laertes was in Puerto Rico filming a movie.
Yeah. It's just,
I mean,
how it is kind of insane.
It's incredible. It's so incredible.
Yeah, it is incredible.
So we talked a little bit about those toys, and you talked about how you layer things together. Yeah. So like you were kind enough to share some screenshots from you working on the project. And so I think this is fascinating. I would love for you to kind of talk us through what we're looking at here. You know, because like this, you know, if you want to physicalize the sound, that's what we're looking at. Yes,
that's correct. So what we're looking at here is a sort of rough draft version of the first act of Hamlet. And what we see here is that each one of the voice files that we received from the actors have been placed next to each other, so that these are sort of the visual representations of those audio waveforms that we received, those recordings. And so what I'm doing in this picture is I'm essentially editing these wave files so that all the voices line up exactly with each other, so that if one person says a line, the next person's line comes right after it. It sounds as fluid as if you were watching them on stage, but we're literally building it word by word and line by line to make sure that it all works together properly.
And I think maybe, can you expound on that just for a little bit? Because I think that's something that people would really be interested to hear about. It's like the recording, it's not, if the recording of the conversation isn't both sides, it's each individual person's recording is on one line. So if you zoom in, come back, sorry. If you zoom in here, it says Coleman, so that's Hamlet's lines.
Yep.
This says Genet, so that's the father ghost's player's lines. And this says Lassiter, so that's Horatio's lines.
Right, that's correct. So yeah, in the old days of radio drama, what they used to do is just gather all the actors in one room and they'd all talk in mics, and we would record the entire performance simultaneously, similar to what a theatrical performance would be. But in COVID-19, where no one is allowed to be in the same room with each other, essentially what we do is we record each individual actor separately, and then put those performances back together as if they were in the same room the whole time. So it's kind of a magic trick. But by the end of it, hopefully what you hear, you'll have no idea that none of these people were ever in the same place.
Yeah. It sounds like a filing nightmare. Like just making sure you I have such a hard time just naming a document. I'm like, I don't know, list, save. And they're like, oh, which one is it? Like, so how do you keep all of that straight?
Well, thankfully, I have two really, really talented people helping me. And the first is Paul Peterson, who is the sound director for the Old Globe, who thankfully has been an incredible resource on this project and has been such a wonderful guide in terms of helping keep things organized. And then we also have our associate sound designer, Nina Field, who's joining us. And her responsibility is a lot of just making sure that, like, when we are like, okay, we need Hamlet's line that was recorded in this scene on this take on this day, I can say to Nina, do you know where this is? And she'll be able to find it. So it is a tremendous amount of note taking and very careful organization so that we can keep everything straight, because you're right, the whole thing is a house of cards in terms of putting it together.
We're like, oh man, we totally lost part 2.
Can't even think about it. I can't think about it.
It's in my like chores folder. Oops.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I was going to ask is, like, so this, we have another thing here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, what I was going to ask is like, how much control do you have over the recordings? Like how much can you change how it sounds versus like can you auto tune me into a pop star?
I mean, technically, yes.
Actually, that's really what I want to get to.
Okay, great. Okay, well then let's move right there. Yes, technically I can auto-tune you into pop star, but I can't guarantee any success from it. I mean, that is the eternal equation, right? Like, which is technology has the ability to assist you to greatly expand upon the perception of your performance. So, for example, if you're an actor and you give a terrific performance, I can make you sound like you're coming from far away, for example. If you're an actor and you give a less than terrific performance, I can also make you sound like you're coming from far away. But what I can't do is use technology to make you sound like you're doing a better performance. You know what I mean? Like, that is unfortunately my limitation.
Excellent. I mean, we'll talk later, and I got some great songs I'd love to lay down with you. So you talked a little bit about, like, that's a great thing about like coming from far away or coming from not. So like in this audio format, you talked a little bit about like how sound takes on a major storytelling load, because like on stage, you see someone enter and you're like, oh, hey, Horatio, how's it going?
Yeah.
But you don't see him enter. So how do you know, like, if someone comes in without being like, oh, it's nice to see you, Lindsay. Thank you for entering the scene. Like, how do you build those things? Enters and exits, directional sound to indicate who's talking to whom, something that's public versus private. How can you? What are the tricks that you can use to help explain the plot?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned this, because really this is the thing that Barry Edelstein and I are in a constant conversation about, which is how do you do this? And we want to give a really authentic experience. We want to give people the experience that they're really hearing something that feels new and feels exciting. And so there are things that we do in terms of creating proximity, where one voice feels further away, one feels closer, stuff like that. We do use occasional sound effects to determine specific characteristics that would help us understand better. For example, if you and I are standing outside in a field late at night, I can provide an environment that sounds like that will help you feel that way. Mm-hmm. And then it's really about how much you want to get into that. Barry and I are having this ongoing conversation about footsteps, and how much footsteps do we want to hear? Do we want to hear a little? Do we want to hear a lot? How does that work? Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? Is it distracting? There's just so many ways to look at it. And it's really kind of a taste thing. So you just figure it out as you go.
The great footstep debate of 2021.
It's so true. It's true.
It's so fascinating. We're going to get to questions from you all in a quick second. So if anybody has any questions, this is a great time to start popping them into the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. But I have one last question for you, Lindsay, before we move on. So like you alluded to this in like when we first started talking about the project, but like that there's the difference between the lines, the music, and the sound effects.
Yeah.
And like those are like three very separate layers that all have to talk to each other. But like how does one inform the other? What's the process of going from what do you need to lay down first, then second, then third, and then one of the big things that we on stage with the production would be like transition music. Yeah,
totally.
But in this stage production, that was so that we needed 30 seconds to roll off the scaffolding and the 16-foot statue of Hamlet.
Right.
On the radio, you don't need that time. So like, does it change how the music interacts with the show in that way?
Yeah, it's funny. Some of it is exactly the same, which is that for me, my sound design and my music, maybe it's because of my acting background. Ultimately, I'm really inspired by the performances. So, and I like to build music and sound design that is custom tailored for the performances that are happening in front of me. I mean, one could easily take an idealized production of Hamlet that is, like if you said to me like, hey, Lindsay, I want you to design Hamlet, I could go away and without ever seeing a run through of the show, create what I think is the correct sound design or music for Hamlet. But I have a feeling that as soon as I showed up and saw your production of it, I would realize that I was off because people have different interpretations of things, and it doesn't work as well. So what I really like to do is stay very true to the performances and try to find the music and the sound that will be as organic and as well paired to the performances. Because hopefully, and this is going to sound crazy, Justin, but really, if I do my job super well, you will never even know I'm there. If I do it perfectly, you will never think, wow, this is really interesting sound design. You'll just think, wow, I can't wait to hear what happens next, mm-hmm. And you'll be caught up in the story and in the moment. And that's my job. So mm-hmm.
I'm immersed in this world
exactly
that you built so perfectly that you can't see the matrix.
That's right. So my job is kind of almost to remain invisible in terms of convincing you that these sound and music is so inherently tied to the performances that at the end of it, you just assume all of it came from the actor. But in fact, it's all been built around them, and it's something that's been customized for that performance.
Yeah. So
that's what I look for when I'm doing a theater play or a radio play. That remains the same no matter what.
I love that. It's great. It's such a great, the invisible touch The invisible hand. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Did I just quote a song? I think I may have inadvertently.
Yeah, it's from Genesis, if I remember right.
All right, so we have some great questions that came in tonight. So thank you everybody for popping in your questions. So we're going to try to roll through as many as we can. This is a great question. I feel I should have asked this one. How does sound design differ between the traditional proscenium space of the Globe and the theater in the round in our Cheryl and Harvey White Theater? I would love to know.
Wow, yeah, that is a great question. And indeed, the White and even the Carter before it really sort of presented that unique challenge of like, we have to cover the space. Well, so the difference is really in about how you cover the audience space so that once again, everybody is getting the same show. So a lot of what we do is careful placement of speakers in the White or in the Carter as it used to be, to make sure that everyone is getting a full sound of it. And we sort of, when I'm working on a show, I'm constantly listening to the show in different areas of the theater, just trying to make sure that everyone gets the same thing. So the difference is really in about how you place the speakers and how you make sure that the actors' voices are heard in the same way. And I know this is something the actors have to focus on when they're in the round, is constantly making sure that they're sharing their voice with the entire space, not focusing just on one side or whatever. So that's the big thing we focus on for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's it also in that way, it gives you a lot of tools because you can like directional sound when you're in the round is really a way to play with it.
Yeah.
So there's a question about like, so in as we're going back to ye olde times, right? An idea about like how sound design as like a Foley artist in a way, right? So how is your work similar or different to Foley? And do you ever incorporate Foley into your work?
Well, certainly on these audio dramas that we're doing, the radio play for Hamlet, Foley is a big part of it. And what it is what essentially Foley is attempting to match realistic sounds to an exact performance, which we talk about, for example, footsteps. If I'm having this idea that a voice travels across your sort of listening from left ear to right ear, you want the sound of the footsteps to match that speed as they travel. And that is the Foley of that. You are attempting to match the effects to that time. So in those cases, absolutely, Foley is a big part of the audio drama format. It's less used in theater because in theater, you're able to see most of what's happening around it, and the actors are responsible for their own performances in that way. I have used Foley in certain theater settings. It's usually fairly specialized. And I think, one of the things I really appreciate about theater sound design is that there's a tremendous amount of creative freedom because, when you're creating sound design for film, right, 95% of the time, if you're looking at a visual, right, and the visual is a key going into a lock turning the knob opening, right, the sound that I'm providing is those sounds, key and lock, key turns, door open. But in theater, what is kind of amazing is that there is a certain amount of artifice in the way a show is presented. For example, when you walk into a space and you see a set, right, that's not a real piece of architecture. It's not a real thing. People don't really live there, but it's there as to give you a suggestion to let your mind and your creative imagination imagine what the rest of that space would be like. And so theater sound design is similar in that same way, in which what I'm trying to do with my sound is help open your imagination and evoke or provoke ideas that you'll think of and imagine as you see the space happening around you. So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's really neat that you'd say that, because it's like you can be like, let's make it sound extremely loud on stage, or extremely, how, and what is that saying about that action of opening the door?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, or so this sort of segues into a question in a way. Is like, so what we've talked a lot about good sound design and great sound design because we've talked about your work. What is bad sound design sound like? What happens when a sound designer falls short? Like, what are the clues that we should be looking for if it's not working?
First of all, I want to say I want nothing but good sound design. And I don't mean that just for me. I really want sound design to be universally great. That is my goal. And you mentioned my advocacy work earlier. Part of that advocacy work is about raising the awareness of sound design because I want the entire field of sound design to be successful. That being said, I think sometimes if you ever find yourself being distracted by the sound, that's how you know. If you find yourself in the middle of a story and all of a sudden you're like, what's that sound? Or why does it sound that way? Or what's that thing? Or, if you hear feedback or those things that where sound goes wrong, those are the indications that that maybe the design has had some issues that are not helping with the storytelling. And I mean, the thing is too,
you're seeing the hand instead of the invisible hand.
Exactly. If you're aware of it, then that could be the problem. But, it's so hard, you guys, because the thing is, if you're a lighting designer and you accidentally go into the next cue of the lighting, very few people are going to notice that, or they're going to think, oh, that's an interesting choice. But if sound goes wrong, everyone knows immediately. Everyone. Like if the mic feeds back, no one is in the audience being like, oh, that's an interesting choice for that feedback, right? Like nobody's doing that. Everyone is just going, that's wrong. That's a mistake. And so it's a lot of pressure.
Oh my God. There's no feeling worse of sitting in the audience and being like, that mic back just went out.
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst.
They have a lot to say.
I mean,
you're not getting off stage before they say it.
It's brutal. Or even just like, there's the sound of a phone ring and a person picks up the phone and the phone keeps ringing. Oh man, I want to kill myself. It's just murder.
That's a good one. Does they have the boxes that like you press like?
Yes, they do.
You'll stop it, right?
The voltage generators, yes, for just that reason. So it will operate exactly like a phone does. But oh man, it only has to go wrong once for you to never live it down.
Can you talk a little bit about how you interact as a sound designer with the directors? Like how does that how do you guys come up with what you're going to do together?
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the director is a huge part of my job, interfacing with them. The way I present myself to a director is, I want to know everything you can possibly tell me about how you want to tell this story. What's your ideas for how to reach the audience? And then I really want to facilitate that and be as much of a resource as I can be to that director to give them everything they can possibly need. Now, you were talking before about the idea that it's difficult sometimes to communicate in sound or music terms. And I always like to talk to directors and say, please don't worry about that. Please don't try and say, I think this score should be an E flat or anything like that. Like it does not help me at all to do that. All I really want to know is tell me as much as you can possibly tell me about how you want to tell the story and the ways in which you want to make the audience feel. And then I will do everything I can to translate that into ways that I can help and support you as much as possible.
That's awesome. That's so great. Because I don't know what a major or minor key is. So I could never, we would work great together.
Yeah, I'm available. Call anytime.
Sort of how, this is a great question. And I think it's been one of the great questions of this show because Hamlet kind of ends with a very famous sword fight. How do you do a sword fight for the radio?
Well, that's a great question. And it is one that we are currently sorting out as we speak in this moment in time. I mean, the answer is, God willing, if you have listened to 95% of Hamlet and have been able to suspend your feeling of disbelief and really invested yourself fully in the story, that will have the sounds of swords fighting, We'll have the sounds of people struggling. We'll be able to make it so that if we shape the way those sounds work in a way that you can understand that there is still a story happening through that sword fight, even though you can't see it, and that there are very specific things that have to take place in order for us to understand what that sword fight went through and what it means at the end, which is the most important part of the plot. That if you do that well, that is how you'll be able to figure out how to do a sword fight for the radio. It's really about it. It just comes back to the same thing, which is what's the clearest and best way to tell a story.
Yeah,
and that's all we focus on.
Yeah, when we started talking about it, I was like, that's going to be a fun challenge.
It is, yeah, and it's what it is. You just have to hope it works.
But then you come up, what I always find that like when theater people are given challenges, they come up with more creative solutions than if given like all the tools in the world to do the thing literally.
I mean, that is literally the definition of doing theater to me. You know what I mean? Like, we never have enough money. We never have enough time. So we have to be creative and use ingenuity.
Excellent. I have a couple more, and then we'll let you get to dinner.
Okay.
I know it's dinner time. So how much latitude in putting the thing together do you have, like, to say like add silence or decrease silence? So like if someone's not picking up their cues, can you just cut it out?
Absolutely. We've been doing it quite a bit. And that's not even necessarily a function of them not picking up their cues, as if the actor didn't say their line in time. It's actually frequently because Zoom sort of has a natural latency built into it. People tend to sort of not try to talk over each other on Zoom. So as a result, we actually have to frequently go in and sort of correct what are people being polite on a video conference and make it seem like it's more like a real in-person conversation. So there's a lot of work that is done there. And then beyond that, yeah, but it's a consistent conversation between myself and Barry, the director, to just sort of be like, okay, what's the right level of pause here for this to feel emotionally resonant without it feeling like something else? So it's a case-by-case situation, and there are 1,000 cases every day. So you just have to figure it out.
It's fascinating in that way, where it's like, now that you have total control, you have like total control. You know?
Well, you never have total control.
I mean, I'd say you're like, well, I gave you a note. Can you hit this word? But like, you still got 4,000 other words, man. Like, yeah, you're not going to touch every word in the show. But for in this, you can literally flex and bend them in some ways.
We are absolutely doing that too. I mean, I know you know this, but just the way that we've had to record this particular production with people's schedules and time, we've had to record one half of a scene on one day and another half of a scene 3 weeks later. And so it really is about trying to figure out how to make those things fit together and seem like it all happened at the same time, even though technically it was never done that way.
It's fascinating. It's so cool. I can't wait to see the end of it. If you have time, I have one more.
Yeah, I've got plenty of time.
All right. Thank you. Sorry. I know we're coming up.
No, it's all good. Take it. I'm here as long as you need.
I appreciate that. I want to be respectful of the time that we requested. Gesture on live performance, like gesture will play a big thing. It's like, if you're saying like, it's this big, like how can you do, what tricks do you have in your arsenal in the radio play to help tell some of that story that gesture might say in live performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really kind of a different aesthetic. You know, most people who are listening to audio drama these days in 2021, they're probably listening to it on headphones. And so what we think about in those cases is it's almost like it's an experience inside your mind. You know what I mean? And so as a result, the sound is there to sort of inspire your imagination to see those people and to imagine those gestures. So in terms of how we convey gestures. Sometimes we can do that through specific effects, adding the sound of clothes or adding the sound of objects moving or whatever. But a lot of the time, it's really just about letting the language be as upfront as possible and hopefully immersing you in a world in which you're really focused on hearing it and letting your mind do the work of seeing it. That's the plan.
That's great. I am so excited to immerse myself in virtual Denmark coming up soon enough. It is a feat in and of itself to put this together, but also like that, building this thing with you has been such a joy, Lindsay. And it's great to be able to have you in my Zoom life.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I'm going to be sad when this is over.
No, we'll love to do another one.
Yeah, please.
Well, Lindsay Jones, thank you so much for being a part of this tonight with us. Thank you so much for your hard work on this project. And it's just such a pleasure to have time with you. I got a little bit of wrap up to do, but feel free to hang out and
okay, I'll hang. But thanks to everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for all the support over the years at the Globe Theater. I'm so grateful to all of you.
Thank you, Lindsay. You're the best.
All right,
man.
take care.
So I'd like to once again thank Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their support of these Insight seminars, and for Joanne Kilty for support of me and my little part in this. And again, happy birthday, Vicki. I hope you have a wonderful night. I hope you're having a great night out there. A huge thank to our philanthropy department, especially to Haley Meyer and Matthew Lovegood, who do all the hard work behind the scenes to make this program possible, putting together PowerPoints, making sure that we're all in the right webinar. They are spectacular. If you enjoyed tonight, I invite you once again to visit our website and make a gift to our Globe Rising campaign. Our next Insight seminar will be on Thursday, March 25th. We'll be talking to two of my favorite people on this earth, the Globe's associate production manager, Leila Knox, and the stage manager for Hamlet on the radio, Anjee Nero. These two amazing humans have stage managed shows on Broadway, many, many shows on the Old Globe, including The Grinch, Bright Star, Almost Famous, and truly work magics and miracles trying to wrangle all these shows together. They were very instrumental in figuring out how we put together Hamlet on radio. So we'll get to talk some of those brass tacks, which I'm really excited to talk about. We are doing these shows every other Thursday, talking about various aspects of building Hamlet on the radio until the shows premiere on KPBS on April 23rd, which is also Shakespeare's birthday, which is fantastic. Please check out the Globe's website for more information about the show itself, and for the incredible humanities programs that we've scheduled to surround it, including more of these Insight seminars, and Barry's Thinking Shakespeare Live Infinite book, and Danielle Mage's Amato, our literary manager's podcast talk about her on book, which is hers. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is such a pleasure to see you virtually. Stay safe. We'll see you hopefully soon in Balboa Park again. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Thank you.